Hello, YouTubers. Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, I went to the coffee shop this morning. I go to a little coffee shack right across my favorite gas station. Well, you know what? In all honesty, I can't really say it's my favorite gas station anymore because everyone that used to work there has kind of like rotated out. But I still call it my favorite gas station. I went to the coffee shop and I was talking to the server, and she said, "Do you have exact change by any chance? Because we're all out of quarters. We're really low on quarters." And I'm like, "Well, everybody's low on quarters nowadays." And she says, "Well, we got broken into last night. We got broken into." I'm like, "What? Somebody broke into your coffee shop?" And she said, "Yeah." And I'm like, "What did they take?" Ladies and gentlemen, all they took was the quarters. I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, "All they took was the quarters?" And she said, "Well, we don't leave any cash there overnight. But yeah, they came in, they just took the quarters." I'm like, "They didn't take anything else. They didn't take your cappuccino machine. They didn't take your expensive coffee makers. They didn't take any of the coffee, nothing, just the quarters." And she said, "Yeah, that's all they took." So I just happened to have a roll of quarters in my truck, and I gave it to them as a tip. And they were like, "Oh, thank you so much. We got quarters." But that's how bad things are getting. Things are getting bad enough where people are breaking into coffee shops to steal the quarters. Now, some of you may think, and I thought this at first also, it was probably somebody that was having a problem with substance abuse or something like that. And that could be. But I would think that if it's somebody that's having problems with substance abuse, that they would have taken other things to try to sell, on the cheap, to try to go and pawn it or something like that. But either way, things are getting bad enough where people are stealing quarters out of coffee shops. That ought to tell you something. It's the first time I've ever heard of that happening. Let me know in the comments, what are some crazy stories that you've heard about recently with crime? But another thing I wanted to talk about is this. It's normalcy bias. It's normalcy bias that is self-induced. Not normalcy bias that is someone who is ignorant of what is going on because they just don't know any better. But people that actually know what's going on and they decide to keep going with the flow, I guess you can say. Right? So I went to get some gasoline after I left the coffee shop. And I'm talking to a gentleman, and we usually chat whenever I go get gas at Costco. And if he's there, we usually chat, while I'm getting gas. And this time I had to fill up a few cans of gasoline, so I was there a little longer than normal. And we start talking about the weather, and then we start talking about the economy and recession and all this kind of stuff, price of gas. And he says, "Yeah, tell me about, this recession that we're in," which is not a recession according to the government. But anyways, I digress. He says, "Tell me about it." He says, "I'm afraid to look at my 401k. I just decide not to look at it at all." I'm like, "You have a 401k that you've been putting your money into, and you refuse to look at it because you're afraid." He says, "Yeah, I'm wishing and hoping that things turn around." That's what he's putting his future on, his wishes and hopes. And then I told him, I says, "You know what?" I said, "I'm going to give you some bad news right now." I said, "Your 401k is not going to rebound to where it was before." And then I said something that kind of surprised him. I said, "And if it does, nominally, so let's say, for example, if you have $100,000 in there now and it goes down to about $70,000 because of the stock market," I said, "by the time that it goes back up to $100,000, where it's the same thing that you had in there," I said, "the purchasing power of that $100,000 is going to be a lot less than what it was before it started going down." And he looked at me, he kind of like didn't understand. I said, "What I'm saying is that you're going to lose money one way or another. If you leave it in there, you're going to lose money. And even if it goes back up to where it was before, where you don't think you're losing any money, you're going to lose purchasing power," which is what? You're losing money. And what does money represent? Money represents your time, your labor. And he said, "Yeah, I'm just going to leave it in there, though. I'm not going to do anything else with it." So I told him, I said, "Do yourself a favor. If you want to leave it in there, that's fine. It's your money. You're the one that earned it. I said, however, why don't you go to Alaska Rare Coins and buy yourself a couple silver coins every payday? Buy 1 or 2 ounces of silver every payday. Because if you have enough money to put in a 401k, you probably have enough money to go buy a couple ounces of silver every payday. And he gave me the look like a deer with headlights. And at that point, I kind of understood what I was dealing with. Someone that is just ignorant of what's going on, and someone that wants to stay ignorant. Why? Because that's all he knows. It's all he knows, and he's afraid of losing everything that he's worked for. And everything that he's worked for is in that 401k. It took about 26 years before the stock market recovered to the same level that it was when it started crashing in 1929. So everyone that left everything in there, hoping and wishing that eventually the market would recover, well, the market recovered. It did recover. However, it took about 25, 26 years, a full generation. And by that time, when it had recovered to the same amount, nominally, that it was before it started going down, how much purchasing power do you think was lost in 25, 26 years? That's what's going to happen this time around. People are going to lose everything, and people that keep hanging on to hope, I guess you can say, and leaving their stuff in there, they're going to find out that it's going to be a very long time. But what I ask people is this, especially those that are a little older. For example, let's say you're 60 years old or 55 years old, and you have which this gentleman, I think he's probably around my age, maybe a little bit older. That's the position he's in. Do you have 25 years? If you have everything in the stock market, everything in a 401k, do you have 25 years for that to recover before you're going to be needing that money in order to live on? Ask yourself that question. We have a personal friend of the family, same way, 100% self-induced ignorance. Why? Because she just doesn't want to think about it. She has a whole bunch of money in a 401k, and I hear my wife talking to her saying, you need to go ahead and diversify. And I'm not a financial advisor, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just telling you a story. I hear my wife talking to her saying, you need to diversify. She said, that's fine that you have your 401k, because people are clinging on to their 401ks. It gives them hope. It gives them hope that they're going to be able to retire with dignity, when they don't understand that their wealth, that their labor that they put into that 401k is being stolen right from under them. And she understands this. And I even hear my wife tell her, and kudos for my wife, I hear my wife tell her, go buy some silver, buy some gold, go buy some long-term food storage. It took about 2 years of my wife talking to her about this. Not every time, but she would bring it up every once in a while when it was conducive to the conversation that they were having. She's like, go buy some extra food and fill your pantry. Buy enough for 6 months to a year. Finally, I overheard her telling my wife, yeah, I went out and I stocked up my pantry and I'm going to order some freeze-dried foods to have for an emergency. Finally, after like 2 years of me hearing this, them talking back and forth. And it's not me snooping. It's that, I'm sitting right there next to my wife when she's talking, so I can pretty much hear everything. So after about 2 years of talking about this, she finally woke up to the fact that you do need to have a stock pantry, that you need to have long-term food storage or foods that's going to last you, a long time, just in case you ever need it. So that's the first step. But she refuses to accept the fact that all of the labor that she has invested in that 401k, it may not be there when she needs it. Now, I'm not saying that the money won't be there, that the fiat currency won't be there. Probably will. But ask yourself a question. Does a $20 bill buy you today what it did 20 years ago? And you all know what the answer to that is. And that's exactly what's going to happen to those nominal dollars that are in those 401ks, that are in pension funds, that are in the stock market. They're still going to be there in the same amounts that they were before, maybe even a little higher. Who knows? But will they buy you what they did when you earned it? And the answer to that, I can tell you explicitly, that is no. It won't be there. Ask yourself one question before I go ahead and finish this off. The pension funds, I think it's CalPERS, in California. It's like a really, really big pension fund. I read a short article here a while back that said how much trouble they were in because they invested I think in a lot of stocks over in Russia. They invested in a lot of stocks over there, and they've lost like $500 billion or something like that. Well, in the last 14 years in the stock market, it's been one of the greatest returns of all time, nominally. The stock market has made returns like crazy. Like almost anyone could trade in the stock market and make money, right? In the last, I would say, close to 14 years, after 2008, maybe around 2000 or 12 years, 2010 and going forward probably, the stock market's been on fire. People have been making money left and right off the stock market. But a pension fund that has billions of dollars, multiples of billions of dollars, they lose money year over year. Do you really think that they're in it for you, ladies and gentlemen? Wake up. Wake up. I'm not telling you to take all of your money out of your pension fund. I'm telling you to do a little bit of your own research. And then maybe you can convince yourself that being a little bit diversified is a good thing to do. Having said that, I hope you got something out of this. Remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place, and you know that it will be a better place. Many blessings to all of you and your families. I'm Alaska Prepper. I'm out. God bless.